is the game really over? Even when we die, is the game over? What do we leave behind? Earlier before the podcast, I was telling you this example that Calestous would have a slide where he'd have a zebra on a motorbike speeding across the savannah, which is very counterintuitive. You'll think of a zebra carrying a motorbike on its back, maybe somebody leading it.
Yeah.
But the other way around implies the zebra has actually learned.
Yeah.
And from when I first met Calestous, late Prof. Juma, through his writings in The Nation, I was living in Chicago at that time. I was working in a company called EKI, Electronic Knowledge Interchange, established by Robert Blackwell Jr. If you're listening to this from Chicago, thanks for being my mentor, and Bernard Lloyd, who would lead us in the context of the Black alumni.
Big up.
Of MIT. Asanteni sana, you opened my mind. Huh? I would read about Juma, and he would write about Vision 2030 and all these things in Kenya in the 2000s. Mm-hmm. And I wondered, who's this man? And I figured if I go to Harvard, I'll figure out who he is. And I got my recommendations. I got one from Larry Bakau, who at MIT was one of my key inspirations, and Mwalimu Haemba, Christopher Haemba, who runs Nova Pioneer. He was our deputy master at that point at Alliance. Mm-hmm. And when I got to the US and met Juma had a very simple way of hobnobbing with the high and mighty in the world. But he had a simple way of remaining rooted and working with what he had. Even when things were tough, Juma will just plow ahead. And a year before he died, he introduced me to then head of ACTS. It was a gentleman called Dr. Cosmas Oching, who then invited me to join the board. My term was renewed last year. I'm now in my 8th year on the board. My 3rd term, typically we have 2 terms, 3 years each. And at that point, I didn't realize why he was asking me to join. It's because he knew he was going. And then shortly before he died, his last email, and we had an exchange, he wrote indicating, Martin, it wasn't to me, it was to students who are at Harvard in his class, which had taken on innovation and development from South Korea, an institution called the Korean Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, KAIST, which is the one that's partnering with the Kenya Advanced Institute of Science and Technology in Konza. And he's writing to them, PhD students, thanks for being in my class. I had these dreams for ACTS, which I modeled on SPRU, which is a school based at the University of Sussex on issues of policy, Science Policy Research Unit. And he says, I had this dream for ACTS to be like SPRU, but somewhere along the way, the dream died. KAIST took it through. And so shortly after he passed on, the legacy he left for me is that even after he's gone, this dream he had of complex science and simple technology can still live on.